once I realized that the don't is only as powerful as the story behind it, it changed things a little bit for me. Every time someone said, don't do this or don't do that, it was almost like you couldn't avoid a don't. That's what a guy told me very early on in my career. And so when someone said, don't do this, it was almost as if I did it. But if there was a story enough that was compelling enough that helped me to understand the result of what would happen if I did it, and then they told me, so don't do that, depending on how compelling the story was, is if I actually did what they told me not to, or if I stayed away from it. And so as I looked at this, it was incredible because there's a lot of times where all we hear is don't. And a relationship with God a lot of times is this way, or we think it's this way. It's not, but it's the way that we view it. God is saying, don't do this, don't do that. You have to do this. You have to do all these things. It's like, but it was amazing because in Proverbs 23, and I want to break this down for you because on this episode of Inchstones, which is where we go through the corresponding proverb for the corresponding day, I want you to break down, there's 31 proverbs in the month. And there's 31 days or 31 proverbs in the book of Proverbs, and there's 31 days in a month. Well, it's broken down into 3 different parts. From Proverbs 1 through 10, it's very nice, inviting, talking about all the features and benefits. Second one, from 21 to or from 11 to about 20, it's talking about like, these are all the things that you should be aware of. And then from 21 to 30, it literally is like a smack upside the head being like, yo, this is what I'm telling you. Like, don't do that. These are the things that are in line, but it's an inviting, so it runs down the line. And then Proverbs 31 breaks it down into the ultimate amazing thing, which is a Proverbs 31 woman. And the only way we'll be able to sustain a Proverbs 31 woman in your life is if you listen to all the Proverbs from 1 to 30. And so when we think about it in that breakdown, we're in Proverbs 23, and so it's a bit strong. And in this whole proverb, it was tough when I was reading it because it was talking about don't. It was don't this, don't that, don't this, don't that, don't this, don't that. But what was amazing about it is when he got to the end, he gave a compelling story, compelling enough, not in every aspect of my life, but compelling enough to be able to look at it and say, maybe I should rethink some of the things and not look at it as a prison sentence of me saying like, don't do this, don't do that. You have to be locked in. But here's the reason why you shouldn't do it. And that reason why is because I really want you to experience the greatest amount of peace, joy, love, patience in your life. And I don't want you to have to go through these things. So it's the breakdown of 23 is incredible, and I'm excited to be able to share it with you. So why don't we get this party started?
On my mind, I got 2 shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because it's hurting. Right before your eyes, so it's coming to no surprise. The takeover is televised. Over and over and over again. Make no mistake, we continue to win. Defeat never known, cause I will not lose. They wanna mimic my moves, but can't walk in my shoes.
I think one of the most powerful things that I've got a chance to be able to do in a lot of years in my professional career was the podcast. And I believe that if every single person with a business or with a following or any of those things, if you utilize the power of podcasting, I think that it honestly is transformational. It's unreal what has been able to happen. So in Proverbs 23 in Inchstones, so to break down what an Inchstone is, it's a small little victories that we can get every day. And when we look at those and we celebrate them, right? Because if we do something and it's not celebrated, and especially celebrated publicly, in our head, a lot of times it's as if it never happened. And so we want to learn how to be able to celebrate people all the time, because encouragement is something that most people are lacking, but will create so much result and return on investment. The reason why I say this is because I was very fortunate to be encouraged throughout my life by my parents growing up. I'm still encouraged by my brother. He'll call me and just tell me he's proud of me. And, I got friends that are constantly lifting me up, and I want to thank you guys, every one of you, for that. But in Proverbs 23, it was rough. It was a rough read this morning, because as I was reading it, it was like, oh man, like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And it's super strong. And it leads with a lot of don'ts, but although it really drives home the why in the end. And I invite you, if you haven't ever read any of the Proverbs, I'm not reading them from a religious standpoint, from a ritualistic standpoint, just reading them from a relationship standpoint, and start to see, can I read the same proverb on the 23rd of every month and it read different? Yes, because my circumstances are different. And the word at first, I'll read it and then it'll read me. And so when we go through this, it's incredible, and I want to read some of the don'ts that you'll hear in this. I wasn't going to, but I feel compelled to, because I really want you to see. It says, when you dine with a ruler, note what is before you. Put a knife to your throat if you are given to gluttony. Do not crave his delicacies, for that food is deceptive. And as I read through, there was a lot of don'ts. There was like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this. And so I was asking God, like, okay, so I understand that, but as a kid, I don't know if you ever had this, but if your parents said, don't do this, and they didn't tell you why, the don't was only as strong as how compelling the story was behind it. And we've all been around, and we all know that person that had the dad, especially the girls growing up, that had the dad that was like, don't do this, don't do that. And what'd they do? Exactly that. The story wasn't compelling enough behind it. So in verse 1-3 and then 17 through 18, he talks about comparison will bite you. And if you've ever run into this, if you compare yourself, if you compare your life, if you compare your income, honestly, you'll never live up to that comparison. And what I've even taken it one step further is just to say, comparing yourself, even to yourself yesterday, will ruin the memory of what you had, which that memory should be perfect. I got asked at NiftyCon when I delivered the keynote, which, if you're a company out there, a conference, or organization that brings in keynote speakers, I'd love to be able to come in and share the vibe with your organization. It helps in leadership systems and culture. And what is the vibe? It's you take your heart set, which is your belief system, your mindset, which is your intentions, and your skill set, which is your actions. Put them in line. It creates an irresistible vibe. And when your leadership has that, your culture has that, your systems have that, then you start to be able to have innovation and the ability to adapt immediately within your company, which is unreal. But as when I got to speak at NiftyCon, it was the #1 digital marketing conference for attorneys in the country. And I delivered there, and I got done, and the guy came to me afterward. He said, how do you feel it went? And I just looked at him. I said, for me, it's always perfect. And he looked, at first I could tell he was like, wow, this guy's full of himself. And then I explained, I said, every single thing that happened, do I want to get better? Sure. Is this podcast going to be the best one that I've ever done in my entire life? Hopefully right now, until I do the next one. Then I want to get a little bit better. But I could tell you this, and I want to invite you to do this, is think of every moment that you experience right now as just being perfect. Imagine if it was just perfect, because it's exactly what was supposed to happen. And then, can you make it better? Can you look at it? Can you, look at the tape and get better? All those things, absolutely. But imagine that moment was perfect. Because if not, what happens is we have the tendency to, almost disrespect the moment that happened. And do this as far as comparison, like just be conscious of comparing yourself to anybody else or anything else, and especially even yourself. In verse 4 and 5, there's only one business in the world, and that's the people business. Remove the people, and there's no business. This is something that my pops talked about all the time, right? And it was something in Proverbs where, in verse 4 and 5, and I'll read this do not wear yourself out to get rich. And it says, do not trust your own cleverness, right? And what it's saying here is like, invest in people, invest in relationships. And I tell you, if you invest in relationships, it's the greatest return on investment that you can ever have. Although if you're focused on the return on investment, then it won't come. Invest in people. I have some of the greatest friends in the entire world. Like, my friend Greg Reed, who's now a partner of mine, and I co-host Secret Knock with him. Because of our friendship, there's access to things that otherwise wouldn't be there. But it's the relationships that you invest in. And when you invest in them over time, it's amazing, because he just had his son. He had a traumatic brain injury. And you know what? He was not supposed to be able to get into physical therapy or speech therapy for months and months and months, if not a year, his son. But his son was able to, because why? He knows a couple of people who are very powerful, can make decisions. And because of that relationship, and I said to Greg, what if your whole entire life of building all these relationships, which are amazing, and he's one of the top, thought leaders in the world. But what if all of that was not to be able to build your name and build the 48 books that you've sold and have Secret Knock, the #1 networking conference in the world that you can't go to unless you're invited? What if it was just for this moment of your son? Would it be worth it? And he said 100,000%. And we just laughed. And it's like, it's one of those things where when you invest in people, it has exponential return. In verse 6-8, the food of the world won't satisfy the spirit. And as much as we try and fill ourselves up with things that will make us super happy. I used to think, everybody that was saying like money won't bring happiness, obviously didn't live in Lompoc in a 1-bedroom apartment with me and my brother, my 2 brothers and my mom. And then my dad moved back in. So we had 5 people up in that place. They didn't live there, because if they did, they would know that a little bit of money to be able to get like a double Western bacon cheeseburger at Carl Jr. would make us happy. But then as I started to grow, I started to see, like, if I chased a thing, when I got that thing, I wasn't more happy. It didn't enrich me more. Yeah, it was cool to be able to have it, but I was constantly looking for the next thing. And so I want you to know, and what God wants you to know today, is that the food of the world won't satisfy your soul. Satisfy your soul, and then the food of the world will come too, and you'll be able to enjoy it also. You can enjoy those things. I used to say to my mom all the time, I want to be the first one that is able to do all the things that people say you can't, like, have your cake and eat it too. Well, if I have cake, I want to eat it. But the way to be able to do that is by putting things first. Put your relationship with God first, put your spirit first, put your soul first, put your heart first. And then when God adds all the rest of that stuff to it, then you get a chance to be able to have your cake and eat it too. There's no reason to have cake unless you're going to eat it, by the way. I just want you to know that. In verse 9, it says, know your audience, and then foolish people won't listen anyway. So know your audience. Like, I've done this so many times. I've had incredible conversations with people who do not care. I call it testing out material. And, I'll talk with someone and I'll talk about AI and how excited I am about AI and the, making my job a lot easier and stuff like that. And then I'll have a person that's just like, oh, I don't like AI. It's going to take people's job. And then I try and convince them. And then 15 minutes in, I'm like, I am wasting energy because this person ain't gonna listen anyway. Know your audience, and foolish people won't listen anyway. And I'm not saying that a person who doesn't listen to AI is foolish. I'm just saying in that situation, they don't care. So know your audience. In verse 10, 11, 22, and 25. Respect those who came before you. And so it was talking about don't move an ancient boundary stone. So again, a don't, but when I look at it on the positive side of it, not about the don't, but respect those who came before you. What can it do? Respect is probably one of the most unheralded traits that you could ever have. And if you have respect in business, respect for people, respect for time, I tell you, it was a core principle in our company when we built ours. And we built a multi-million-dollar company with 19 to 24-year-olds at the helm. It's unreal, but it was incredible to see the amount of respect that they had for each other, for the environment, for the guests, all those things, unreal. And that's an unfair advantage. In verse 12, 15, 16, 26 through 28 is guard your heart. And in verse 15, I want to read this to you. In verse 12, sorry. In verse 12, apply your heart to instruction and your ears to words of knowledge. In this proverb, in Proverb 23, it's one of the only places that doesn't add a don't into it, but it's just inviting you to do that. And imagine that. Apply your heart to instruction and your ears to the words of knowledge. And what I wrote down here is guard your heart. Guard your heart, guard your heart, guard your heart. I can hear my mom's voice saying it over and over again. Guard your heart, son. Guard your heart, son. I didn't realize why, But the only way something gets into your heart is through your eyes, through your ears, and through your senses, through what you become aware of through your senses. And once your heart is filled up, it comes out your mouth. And once it comes out your mouth, then your feet start to move towards what you start to talk about. And so if you want to control your actions, don't just look at your actions, look at the words, but don't just look at the words, look at your heart. But don't just look at your heart, look what was going into your heart. You start filtering that, and what will start to happen is things will start to change. Yeah? And so in verse 13 through 13 and 14, communication is at the core of 99% of challenges. Whether this be in business, relationships, anything like that, I could tell you this. Any business that I go into to consult, we call it a vibe check. So we look at, is their heart set, their belief system, their core beliefs in line with their intentions every day, their mindset, and is that in line with the actions that they take, which is their skill set. And when we do this vibe check in a company, and when I'm consulting with somebody, 99% of all challenges come down to communication. It's not that the principle was wrong. It's not that the rules were wrong. It's just that they weren't communicated. And most of the time that happens in the onboarding process. And so communication is at the core of 99% of the challenges. In verse 19 through 21, it just invites us to be able to keep a sober mind. Keep a sober mind. Now, it's a don't here, but also, too, imagine like a person says, hey, don't alter your brain or whatever it is. And on the flip side of it, the positive side is just keep a sober mind, body and spirit. Keep a sober mind, body and spirit. And so it goes right in line with, what's in your heart, what's in your mind, and how are your skills or your actions in line with that. And so that creates that irresistible vibe. But just be conscious of this, because a relationship with God is not just about the don'ts. There are them. He will give us don'ts in our life, but he will always make sure that there's a compelling story to help you to understand why you shouldn't do that thing. And he'll put more emphasis, I believe, with a relationship with him, or my relationship with him, he'll put more emphasis on all the amazing advantages as opposed to the things that, that you shouldn't do. And so I just want to encourage you in that. And as we finish up, listen to all of the above and you will, I said, don't listen. Don't listen to all of the above and you will experience sorrow, strife, complaints, pain, exhaustion, that will lead you to seek out fixes that dull the pain, and that will lead you, let me read it again. I'm stuttering here. Don't listen to all of the above, and you will experience sorrow, strife, complaints, exhaustion that will lead you to seek out quick fixes to dull the pain. And this will not end well. So think of that, like if all these things that he talked about, right, in these points, and I'll just repeat it again because I was reading and it was, I wasn't able to read it very well. So comparison will bite you. There's only one business in the world, and that's the people. The food of the world won't satisfy the spirit. Know your audience. Respect those who came before you. Guard your heart. Communication is 99% at the core of 99% of all the challenges. Keep a sober mind, body, and spirit, and then listen to all of the above, and you will. Let me say it again. Don't listen to all of the above, or you will experience sorrow, strife, complaints, pain, exhaustion that will lead you to seek out quick fixes to dull the pain. And this will not end well. And as I read the end, it talked about this as far as like having sorrow, having strife, having pain, having complaints, having exhaustion. All those things cause us to look to something that will dull the pain of what we're going through. And most of the time, something that will dull the pain, let's use alcohol, let's use drugs, let's use any of those things, let's retail therapy. None of those things end well. They don't. They end up with debt. They end up with killing relationships. They end up with, just a lot of challenges. So it's amazing that we as humans would just cover up challenges with more challenges. But we can prolong the result a little bit. But here, a relationship with God isn't about all the don'ts. Although the ones that he shares are so that you can walk the purpose that he designed for you. He encourages us to seek him, to listen to his words, and to apply his lessons, that we so that we aren't the one with the compelling story of the don't. The crazy thing is when I'm saying the don't word again, when we don't listen, then we end up with the compelling story of why you shouldn't, because we can show the result. That sounds crazy. Like if we don't listen, then we are the one telling the compelling story. And the way to have the compelling story is if you experienced it. And what God is saying is you don't have to go through that. You don't have to go through and experience the hard way, although you could choose that. He wants us to be able to walk in his peace, his love, his joy. And that joy is to fall in love with your current circumstances and allow magic to happen. So this has been Proverbs 23. I stuttered at the end a lot, and I apologize about that. My reading, it's actually my writing, so I should be reading it better. But I appreciate every single one of you. I appreciate you tuning in. And this has been another episode of Inchstones. Buy the book, buy Bling. Come and see us at the Vibe Room. I love you a bunch, and I'm officially off the hot seat. Peace, love, and soul.
On my mind, I got two shines, so every day I grind. Work in the morning, work in the evening. We's achieving, cause we believing. It's for certain, we put the work in. We ain't stopped just because